Good evening and welcome to the Utopian Baseball Universe. I'm Joey Buchholz. We've got a very special show tonight, a unique show. Um, Usually what we do here is we have someone on and we kind of talk about their own baseball memories. And I'm sure that at some point this year we'll get to our guests' memories. But tonight I want to give this man a forum to talk about something that he's working on that I found out about 2 weeks ago. I love the idea so much. I reached out to him personally that day. So I'm excited to have Mark Weber on tonight. Mark Weber is the brainchild behind Eternal Baseball. And we're giving him a forum tonight to tell you all about it, why he started it, how it works, where you can find it. And then at the end of our show, we'll get to the Florida Marlins roster for 2021. And if you have any questions or comments for Mark and Eternal Baseball, we're going to get to those at the end of the show. So without further ado, let's bring on Mark Weber. Mark, thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm very excited to share Eternal Baseball with the members of the Utopian Baseball Universe. First, just tell us how this all started for you. I'm fascinated with it.
Well, I appreciate it, and it was nice. I met you, I think, on day one, right? At least digitally over Facebook, and I appreciate the forum and the chance to get in touch with some other fans who probably don't know what Eternal Baseball is all about. And when we talked about what Utopian Baseball Universe and Eternal Baseball are both all about, it's a similar feeling, but I think we're doing different enough things. That's what we talked about. Doesn't feel like we're stepping on each other's toes at all. And we're both appealing to die-hard baseball fans. And that guys like me, guys like you, I don't think they have one outlet, right? Like, this is all I do for baseball. I think they take in all sorts of different feeds and groups and shows, and not that they'll watch anything baseball, but they pick and choose their favorites. And there certainly is, I think, a long list for a diehard baseball fan. So, and I think one of the cool things about what you and I are both doing is it can fill some of the time when there is no baseball, because baseball, it's the longest season, and the off season is fun too, but it is a long time between the end of the World Series and the start of spring training. And so I think that's where creative things like the Utopian Baseball Universe and Eternal Baseball can kind of scratch that itch, especially in the off season. So basically I've always had the thought that it would just be cool to have some kind of league or video game or some way that teams could compete across eras. It's the Barstool conversation, right? Could Babe hit Max Scherzer, right? Could Frank Thomas hit Walter Johnson? That kind of thing. But I think sports is all about, it's about the pride in the uniform and the team you grew up rooting for or the school you went to. And so I love the idea of the best players of all time for a specific franchise, for all the specific franchises, suiting up together. There's something really, really cool about the idea of Walter Johnson throwing to Joe Mauer, right? I love it. I think it's so cool. And I think baseball's my favorite sport, but I also think it's the one that translates the best across eras, because it is so stat based and you can measure guys up against each other. And there's any number of things that complicate that matter, from, the smaller leagues, in the early 1900s. It's harder to make a major league roster than it is now. So few less clubs. And yet it was segregated. They didn't have a lot of the Hispanic and Negro players allowed into baseball. So it certainly wasn't a level playing field. And you can't say they were playing against all the best talent. But then you look at, how big the ballparks used to be versus how high the mound used to be, into the better training of today and, kind of the PED explosion of the late 90s. there's just so many different varying factors. But I think if you look overall, a great player from the 20s could probably play today. I don't have any doubt about that. And especially with what we know about, training and health and recovery. And, it's one of the crying shames of sport that Gale Sayers hurt his knee and was never the same again. And today, that's like a 6-month injury. He would have been as good as new with modern medicine. So
Yeah.
I love the idea of just going across the eras. And so I'm half of the crew at Eternal Baseball. So we run 2 deep, which is good in case somebody gets sick or hurt. And it was an idea that I was thinking about, and I talked with my really good friends. My oldest friend, guy I've known since I was 4, named Brent Rotundi. We grew up together in the middle of Oregon, and he's a web programmer. And so we were always talking about we should do something together. Like, he's the nuts and bolts mechanic, but also a diehard baseball fan and a really creative guy. And we finally put this together and thought, you know what, let's work on it. It was kind of our side hustle, our side project. And we started last April, and we've been building it, and we finally were able to get it launched. I really wanted it launched before spring training started. And so we managed to get that going and went live, 2 weeks ago. And our games are actually started. We're a week in, and we are using a simulation software called Action with an exclamation point PC Baseball, and it's by DK Sports. You can find it at www.dksports.com. And we always want to make sure we mention them anytime I do any kind of podcast or appearance or radio program, and there haven't been a lot. But I always want to make sure we mention them and give them credit, because it's the brilliance of their sim that really makes Eternal Baseball work. And what we've put together is nothing any fan couldn't do on their own with the Action PC Baseball engine. But let me tell you, we put in, hundreds, if not thousands of hours of work getting the rosters right and tweaking it just so. And when you told me a little bit about Utopian Baseball Universe, you actually do a lot more work than we do, because this program does a lot of the schedule automation and some of the things that are, I know it's probably quicker for you than when you first started doing it, but it's still, it's still a lot of heavy lifting. And so I was very impressed when you told me how your league works, because you do a lot of the work that this program does for us. And that doesn't make ours better. It actually means we're less in control of it. But when I thought about all the work we had done for our league and then talked to you, I had nothing but mad respect about, how much time and effort and love you've put into your league.
And I agree with you. I don't see either model as better or worse, but I see, I love the differences, and that's why we wanted to have you on tonight, is because, I would celebrate if there were 1,000 of these out there. I'd like to talk to everyone, but what I liked about yours was of some of the differences. Now, one of the things that you and I have talked about is the how we create our rosters. Tell the people watching right now, like, what your process was, because I have to admit the way I built the rosters was somewhat careless. It was, a lot of it was just, okay, I need a third baseman here. Who's the first third baseman I can think of for this team? And then once the season started last year, I was like, oh, shoot, I forgot this guy, or, there's a better option here. And in a way, I almost use that to my advantage, because if someone says, like, I don't know if you watched last night, we had Rick Lenenberg on, and he said, I would add Tommy Davis here. And the way I approached it was, well, he's going to be next year. He's going to be a free agent signee for the Dodgers. Mm-hmm. So if you're not seeing him this year, we got him next year, because I always want to have some turnover, so that fans of a particular team, if your team didn't do very well in 2020 or 2021, I can say, but hey, now look, Cy Young is coming in next year.
Right.
Or Tommy Davis or a player that I didn't have. But tell the viewers what your process was for just determining who was on which roster. Because I know when I heard you on the radio last week, we both had a hard time determining where like a Randy Johnson goes.
Right. And that's no small decision if you're a Mariner or a Diamondback fan, right? For, one of the, 10 best starters of all time, you either get him or you don't, right? It's make or break for a team. I mean, I like that the sim that we do, and I assume the sim that you do, mirrors real baseball enough that having an ace, a drop dead ace, even with this level of competition, right? So it's 25 man rosters. We have 32 teams in our league. So, that's not a lot of players compared to all the guys who've ever played baseball, but there's still aces, right? There's still, the Yankees got beat in Eternal Baseball today, and it was their number 5 starter, Bob Shockey, got lit up. And it's like, yeah, Bob Shockey sucked today, but still Bob Shockey, right? Like, it's still, if you line up all the Yankees of all time and pick 5 guys to be your rotation, and Bob Shockey's number 5, and if Shockey sucks, or he did today, right? The guys behind him on the roster, but behind him are Guidry and Lefty Gomez and Masahiro Tanaka and, guys who are great. Pettit isn't even on their main roster. And that, shocks Yankee fans like crazy. But our rosters were built, and just for simplicity, to start with a baseline, we said, okay, we're going to build 25-man rosters. And then we decided we needed some depth that wasn't on the main roster. So we were going to build a 5-man sort of taxi squad or inactive roster. I can't bear to call it the minor leagues, right? Because the names on it are ridiculous for every team. Eventually, we decided for depth, we just built out 15 slots. So essentially, we've made a 40-man roster for all the major league clubs. And we started with the members of the National Baseball Hall of Fame, figuring if you're a Hall of Famer, you must make your team's all-time roster. And by and large, it's true, although there are some teams so deep that they even have Hall of Famers who might not quite edge their way onto the team. I don't think we had to leave any off, though there's a handful of players in the Hall of Fame who played for franchises so old they didn't become any major league franchise that still exists. So there's a handful of those late 1800s players who we just don't have a home for them. And who knows, maybe down the road, and you've told me about some of the creative stuff you do. Maybe we put together a barnstorming team some year that rotates in, and it's the mad as hell Hall of Famers who are back to represent the Spiders or the Rail Riders or whatever. Anyway, so that gave us a really good baseline for who was going to be on what franchises, and we built out our franchises with the 30 current major league clubs. And then I really wanted to bring the Expos back because I know Montreal has still, rightly never recovered from the loss of their team. And I've always thought it was I don't want to say a disservice, but unfortunate at least the way that went down, because the 94 Expos were so good and so dynamic. And it was the first year the Yankees were good in ages.
Yeah.
So the Yanks were looking really strong in the American League, but nobody was as good as the Expos. Now, playoffs don't always go chalk, but if they had, you would have had tons of eyeballs on that World Series for the revival of the dormant Yankees. And the Expos almost assuredly would have beat them. So there would have been so many eyes on this World Series, probably would have been a really good series. The Expos likely win. And then, who knows what that does for baseball in Montreal. But instead, we get the strike and everybody's mad at baseball. And by the time we get baseball back, that Expos team is fractured forever. They all get shipped out. Grissom's gone. Wetland's gone. I think DeShields is gone. Ken Hill is gone. They're just scattered to the winds. And it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy from there. So anyway, so we really wanted to add the Expos, and we wanted to build out an even league with 8 4-team divisions. So that gave us our 31st. And in our very first iteration, we tried to build an all-time team from both Washington Senators teams. The one that played till 1960 that became the Twins, and the one that played from 61 to 71 that became the Rangers. And that was the old joke about the Senators, right? Washington, D.C. was first in war, first in peace, but last in the National League.
Yeah.
And it kind of bears out. They have some Hall of Fame talent, including Walter Johnson. So they were competitive every fifth day for sure. But we simulated a couple seasons, and they just got pounded. Every year, the Senators were awful. And so we decided, all right, it's not going to be compelling, especially because they have the Nationals now, right? If they didn't ever get our franchise, I would probably feel the same about them as the Expos. But they got the Nationals, and they love the Nationals, and it would make the Twins and Rangers better to give them access to the players from the franchises they inherited. And so a Twins fan immediately, I think he posted or messaged me, but he's like, he must not know his history that well. Who's Walter Johnson? He never played for the Twins. And I'm like, well, you're right. But give it 2 weeks and you will never complain about having Walter Johnson in your outfield. And if you want Killebrew on your Twins, he started as a Senator. So, bear with me. You're going to like the guys you got. And poor Texas. I mean, they were the 10 years that the Senators were back as an expansion club. I think there's only 2 players from that decade who make the all-time Rangers. Frank Howard and Toby Harrah are the only 2 that played in Washington and end up on that all-time Rangers squad. So anyway, that gave us our 32 teams. And then it was really number crunching, and it's the site everybody uses, baseball-reference.com. I mean, just the best stat website out there. And we went through and we looked at the cumulative WAR leaders for pitchers and hitters. And so we were looking at the guys who built up the most career WAR for that club. And then we took the top whatever, a little more than we needed to fill out the rosters. And then we looked at, and this is how the whole Eternal Baseball Sim is based, and it requires explanation once in a while. We looked at the best 3 consecutive seasons of every player's career, and then we averaged them to give them their basic stat line, because we didn't want to take just their best season, right? If you're only looking at one season, then Maris is going to hit 61 every year, right?
Yeah.
And I don't have any problem with Maris hitting 61. I have a real problem with him just edging Luis Gonzalez and Brady Anderson, right? For those 2 guys who just had ridiculous solo spike years of power that they never, reached again. So I'm not going to take those seasons away from Gonzo and from Brady Anderson. But if you have to keep the seasons around them, it helps keep it a little bit more manageable, right? For those ridiculous spikes. Like I'm a huge Ricky Henderson fan, but he only stole 130 bases once, right? I can't have him doing that every year. But the year before it was like 110. And the year after it was like 88. So even if you average those 3, he's still the best base stealer in the league. He's just not having that once in a lifetime season every season. So that gave us sort of a statistical baseline with the guys who had accumulated the most WAR for the clubs. And then that's how we filled out the rosters. And they're almost all the same constructively. It's a 25-man roster. So it's 2 catchers, 6 infielders? Yeah. 6 infielders and 6 outfielders, maybe 5 outfielders, 5 outfielders, 6 infielders, 2 catchers, and then a 12-man pitching staff, which is usually 6 starters, 6 relievers. But once in a while, there'll be starters who are tremendous, and can't crack the top 6. Mets are a good example. I'm a huge David Cone fan. Cone cannot crack the starting rotation, but he's amazing and better than most of the relievers in their pen. So there are unbelievable talents like David Cone, Tom Glavine, who are relief pitchers in our league. And I know that makes no sense from their careers, but as I've explained it to a couple different people, the idea is if you took every player that ever played for your team, that belongs to your team. Like I had a lunatic Padres fan saying, we've got Piazza and Santiago catching. And I'm like, you had Piazza for 200 at bats, right? Like, come on. So the ones, I don't say own, that sounds bad, but the ones that belong to your franchise, every one of them from your entire existence in their absolute prime, who would be on your team to play one season? Just one season. And that's where you run afoul a little bit of the guys with the real long legacies. I had Royal fans furious that Frank White not only wasn't starting for Kansas City, but wasn't on the main roster. But his numbers, again, peak numbers, 3 best consecutive years averaged, he's not even close to Whit Merrifield, the guy they have right now, and Mike Moustakas, who left. And that was, again, a bone of contention for them because Moustakas never played second in Kansas City. But he has played second since, pretty good second base, and they own him. So they get rights to him as a second baseman if they want. And so same way with the A's with Bert Campaneris. A's fans can't imagine Campy not starting at shortstop. He's their 5th best option by the way we cut our stats. Sure. So the way we explained it is, we're trying to make every team as competitive as possible within the software that we're using. And when we explained it like that, some people understood and were cool with it, and some people weren't and just said, if you're making an all-time Royals team without Frank White, you obviously don't know what you're doing. I'm like, I get it, do. But one of the best things is we opened it up, and it's kind of a line, but it's true. And I've used it a bunch of times where I say, we will never know a team better than its diehard fans. Never. And that's true. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback from guys that we missed, guys we never knew about, guys who had a great example, a guy I'd never heard of, an Expos reliever named Woody Fryman. Was a big deal in the late 70s at like age 38. Never heard of the guy. But an Expos fan said, I love the squad, but how'd you forget Woody Fryman? And I'm like, how'd I forget him? I don't even know him right now. But I looked him up, and sure enough, he was amazing in a very short stretch of time. And that's the one, I don't want to call it a flaw, but you only need 3 really good years in a row, and you're on a roster here. And a guy like Frank White, who was really good for 20 years, might not make your squad. And so that's sort of the stuff that we're dealing with, just because we're trying to make every team really competitive. And before we got it rolling, we simulated 10 seasons, and just to get the kinks out, to see where we were. A really good example of the way the numbers can be problematic. There's a guy, I'm not sure he's a Hall of Famer, but there's a guy from the 1890s named John Clarkson. Pitches for, must have been Boston back then, but he's an Atlanta Brave now. And the first season I simmed, I just simmed the whole thing. It took 20 minutes for the computer to crack the numbers. And then I looked at it, and he won like 34 games. And I'm like, good Lord. And then I checked into it. Well, he started like 58 games, right? He led the league in innings pitched with like 440. Like, it was so. And I get that's 1800s baseball, but it would never fly now. And the idea that he was horning his way onto the mound every other day, right? Like tripping Smoltz in the dugout and shoving Maddox down to get to the mound, was pretty comical. And as much as I tried to maneuver his numbers around to make him a more reasonable starter. Finally, I just had to go, you know what? You're going to the pen. And I just made him a reliever because he was a borderline fourth starter. And he was a really good reliever. And that next year, he pitched in like 105 games out of the pen. And I'm like, look, John, your arm's going to fall off, man. So eventually we made him a reliever who doesn't pitch back-to-back days. And you can be that strategic with an individual player. And so now Clarkson's a really good member of the Atlanta bullpen, but he's not skewing our whole league with his, just morbid fascination of being on that mound every day.
Mark, I want to get back to you were talking about when you originally were thinking of a 30-second team. You said you did a sim where you had two versions of the Senators. Tell the folks what you ended up doing for that 30-second team for the inaugural season of Eternal Baseball.
So we were really fencing with it and toying with some really, wild and creative ideas. And it just wasn't going to be the Senators. It just wasn't. There's no crying for the Senators to come back. We weren't going to scratch any itch with that 30-second team. And then the idea came to me, as I recall, and I pitched it to Brent, and he loved the idea. And so what we did was built a team from the greatest players in the history of the Negro Leagues. And I loved the concept because, we are not changing history, and there's no way to make amends for the color barrier that baseball had. But I thought it would tell a great story for the concept that all these guys wanted to do was compete against the best talent every night. And they were competing against some of the best talent, the other guys in the Negro Leagues. And it's, historically, they would barnstorm after the major league season and play against major league talent, if not teams. And they really got up for those games, right? They really wanted to show that their baseball was as good as anybody's baseball. And so we thought the idea of doing that every night would be outstanding. So we were dead set on it. We're going to do an all Negro Leagues team. And there aren't that many guys who actually crossed over from the end of the Negro Leagues to become great big stars in Major League Baseball. So there were a few, right? And so those guys are still with their major league clubs. Jackie Robinson being the most famous, but a couple other guys, Larry Doby with the Indians. There's a Giants outfielder who was pretty sensational.
Monty Irvin, I believe.
Monty Irvin, that's it. So Irvin actually played a little longer, and the Giants are a really hard club to make in Eternal Baseball, because they've been good forever and they've been around forever. So Urban actually would have been on the inactive roster for the San Francisco Giants, but he would start for our Negro Leagues team. And so we decided, you know what, almost always when it came like that, better for the league for them to be playing than sitting somewhere hoping for an injury. So that's how Monty Irvin ended up on the club. So we batted around what we wanted it to be. And originally, I really wanted them in Kansas City, right? Home of the Monarchs, one of the most famous of the Negro League clubs. And that's where their Hall of Fame is. And so I just thought Kansas City was a place for it. There's not lots, but there's two teams in Chicago. There's two teams in LA. There's two teams in New York. Nobody confuses the Mets and the Yankees or the White Sox and the Cubs. But where it got difficult was in building out our divisions. This club, this 32nd club, was going to be in what we call the American League South. And it's the same division that the Royals are in. And I just went, I can't have two different Kansas City clubs in the same division, right? Baseball's been real smart about it. Yankees, Mets, Cubs, White Sox, Dodgers, Angels, not in the same division, not even in the same league, right? So you're seeing different ball players come through that town as the visiting teams. And it didn't make any sense. So we went, okay, fine. If they have to be in the same division, they can't both be in Kansas City. Originally, we named them after a famous club from Birmingham called the Black Barons. And it was just a cool name. Didn't sound like anything else. But given what we're doing and that there is a racial connotation to it, I didn't want to have the word black in the name of the team. I just didn't want anybody to take that the wrong way. So, but we like Birmingham as a sort of a home, or at least a pivotal city in the civil rights movement, and a town that doesn't have any major league sports. So we kept Birmingham, and taking a little bit of a cue from the Natural, we named the squad the Knights. And we really, really like the Birmingham Knights with a K. And I'm sharing my screen here. If you pop it up.
I was going to say, Mark, I think people get tired of seeing me. Can I go off and share your screen?
Yeah, if you can shrink us down to the side and we'll both get better looking. There you go. So I think you can pop on too. We can do both of us on the side.
Let's see.
I've seen that wizardry before. There you are. So this is from a really good friend of mine and an amazing designer, particularly with logos, named Jay Gonzo. And you can find him on Instagram. Just look for J.Gonzo. And he did this logo work for us, and I could not be happier with it. All I gave him were the name, Birmingham Knights, the two main colors, main color black, accent color a crimson, and that I wanted it to resemble a chess piece at sort of a 3/4 angle. And he sent me back 4 different options. Like, he went way overboard. And, I'm a marketer by trade, so I know not to be real careful with the designer feedback. But all I said was, I'd like to tweak the base a little bit underneath the horse. And I'd like an option if I put it on a black background, right? And I've seen enough style guides to know this is exactly what it looks like for a real major league club, right? So he did all of this for us, which is just incredible work. I could not be happier with it. And there's my, black background. The idea being their caps would be black with this horse, right, front and center. So that gave us our Birmingham Knights, and I was over the moon with the work he did for us. So we make sure to pub him up too whenever we get the chance, because he did such an outstanding job for us. So, and that gave us the Knights. And what we found over, and a big tip of the cap too, to I think it's seamheads.com, which is the best site for Negro League statistics. And that's one of the crying shames about the history of the Negro Leagues is the box scores and the records were not kept real close. So there's quite a bit there, but it's not nearly as thorough. But what Seamheads has is better than what Baseball Reference has, which is rare that anybody tops them statistically anywhere. But I learned so much about the Negro Leagues researching how to build that roster. And when we've simmed out the seasons, they are really competitive. They're a good squad. And one of the things that makes them unique is they have 3 or 4 position players, really good hitters, who are also really good pitchers. So their pitching staff is deeper than anybody in the league because they can play, 8th grade or high school ball, where Cristobal Torriente comes in from third base to pitch an inning. And when he gets tired, they don't take him out. They just put him back at third, right?
Yeah.
And they swap guys around. And they were so that league was so multi-talented that they are a bear to deal with in Eternal Baseball. And in one of the quirks of probably our quirkiest division, their division is the American League South, and it's all expansion teams at some level. It's the Texas Rangers, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Kansas City Royals, and the Birmingham Knights. And that's another thing we learned over the years at Eternal Baseball is the teams that have been around forever are always good. Doesn't mean they always win the World Series, but the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Indians, the Giants, Tigers, the Pirates, Phillies, they're pretty much always good because how can they not be? They're pulling from 120 years worth of rosters, right?
Yeah.
And the flip of the coin is also true too. The younger the team, the less talent pool they have to pull from. And for nobody is that crueler than the Washington Nationals, because they don't even get Expos players to pull from. They're only pulling from 2005 and up.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they're competitive now, because it means they have Scherzers and Strasburgs, and in our league they will retain Bryce Harper until Harper becomes, in real baseball, more Philly than he is national, right?
Sure.
It's kind of the Hall of Fame hat debate, right?
Oh yeah.
And sooner or later, there's a handful of guys right now who are on their old squads in eternal baseball, but very shortly they will flip over. You look at it, Christian Yelich for the Brewers is a Marlin in our league. Aroldis Chapman is still a Red, but will become a Yankee pretty quick. And so that will give us some roster turnover, in addition to if somebody has an absolute breakout year this year, right? If somebody just goes nuts, we'll look at their statistics, re-average them with this new unbelievable season, and they could make a jump onto a roster from an inactive slot, or even from not existing before. And the one thing we really have to figure out is rookies. If a rookie, if Kelenic has a great year for Seattle, do we let him onto a roster with just one major league season? That's where it'll get a little tricky, but it's a good problem to have, I think. So anyway, that's how our rosters came together, and we, by and large, people were pretty happy with them. But we did get some fan feedback, mainly from Facebook and also on our website it's www.eternalbaseball.com. And we love feedback. We want to make the teams better. And so someone pointed out Carlos Ruiz should probably back up Darren Dalton in Philadelphia. And we crunched the numbers. They were right. He's better than Mike Lieberthal in the way we look at players. So Lieberthal goes to the taxi squad. Somebody else got released. And Chooch ends up in Philadelphia. The Woody Fryman reliever we never knew about. He's setting up, I think, John Wetland or not Wetland,
Reardon?
Ugueth Urbina.
Oh, okay.
In Montreal, but Reardon is part of the setup crew as well. There were a lot of changes in Seattle, where we had Tino Martinez at first, but Alvin Davis is actually better from a peak OPS sort of standpoint. And defense matters too, and how they hit situationally, lefty versus lefties and righties. So it isn't just OPS, but that's a real basic stat you could look at for kind of offensive contribution. Phil Bradley bumped Mitch Haniger back down to the inactive roster. Joey Cora bumped Yuneski Betancourt out altogether from the inactive roster. And Marco Gonzalez's 2020, which is a weird year to take stats from, but if you average it in with his 19 and 18, we didn't even have him on their inactive squad. He's actually their fifth starter now. So it's creative how it works, and we're so receptive to fan feedback because, we built every roster for 32 teams. You can bet that we were bleary-eyed at some point, or just didn't think about a guy who was amazing. A Red Sox fan brought up Tony Conagliero, right? It's a perfect concept for a player like that who had such a tragic injury young in his career. So yeah, let's look at his 3 years. His overall WAR contribution to Boston wouldn't have been that high because he got injured young and traded right afterwards. So he would have escaped our radar for WAR. He's not a Hall of Famer. And I looked at his 3 years, and they're really damn good. Not good enough to make Boston, however. But it's exactly that kind of guy that we might not have thought of. And so we love it when fans ring the doorbell and say, hey, how about this guy? Because we'll consider everybody, and we've been wrong enough times to actually look forward to feedback. If it makes a team in our league better, then we definitely want to hear about it.
I just want to say that if you ever decide to make merchandise of this Birmingham Knights logo, I will be the first in line to buy a hat because I've got about 70 of these.
I see you have a hat collection.
Yeah, I got a nice. Basically out of the pandemic, that's how I'm spending my money outside of food and bills. Is one of these a month and some baseball books on Amazon.
There you go. Well,
Mark,
it lets you support whoever you're talking about that night. So
yeah, I mean, and it lets the people know, like, they can just see what I'm wearing. Do I want to watch this or not? Mark, if you wouldn't mind, can you walk us through, if I'm a fan of Eternal Baseball and I want to know how's my team doing, can you walk us through the website and show us how we can follow this on a nightly basis?
Yeah, let me pop it up. This is our homepage. So if you go to eternalbaseball.com, this is what you're going to see. And what we do every night or every day is we put up today's scoreboard right near the top. And so if you click on it, it'll get a little larger. It is a bit of an eye test, but there's a lot of info to get to on there. So it's a little better on your own screen than it will be right here. But it gives you the box scores for every game, or not box score, but the thumbnail for every game that day, who won, win or loser, a standout performance. And real small down at the bottom, this is your standings, always updated for the games shown here. And then a snapshot of your league leaders over here. And sometimes it's the hitters, sometimes it's the pitchers, or, the best players of the day. So this is the best way right on our homepage to see how it's going today. And this usually gets posted up midday. And this is the first thing that'll be updated. So we update that, and then right underneath it, we'll put up our the league leaders.
Nice.
So it's not a deep dive, but this is what's readily available and easy to pull. And we have to pull daily. And there's a lot to be done every day, and we're only two guys. So this will give you a look, and you can see how your favorite guys are climbing or dropping down the board. It's a total league look, so it's American League and National League together. And then it's young enough, we don't know exactly how people are interacting with the site. We'll figure that out. That data is out there. But once you've come here, because this is what gets updated first, then you can go to our forums over here, and there is a team-specific forum for all 32 teams. And then at the bottom, sort of an overall general discussion thread. And so every team in here, go to the Braves, their very top thread is box scores. Okay. So if you go into the box scores dedicated thread, again, every team has this as their first post, and scroll down to the bottom. This will be the most current game and what happened today. So, it's so cool just to think about it, to say Warren Spahn beat AJ Burnett today in Miami, and Hugh Duffy hit a home. Hugh Duffy, Freddie Freeman, and Giancarlo Stanton hit home runs, and a couple of steals or a steal for Gary Sheffield. So I love this part of it, and I know fans. What's baseball without box scores? So I know that this is a popular thing, and what's fun, I'm actually the one uploading each of these box scores daily, and you'll see fans following on the message board. So I'll do the first one. Diamondbacks is always first because they're alphabetically top of the food chain. And when I leave the Diamondbacks thread to go to Atlanta, there's 5, 6, 7 people on the Diamondback thread already. And then as I go down, it sort of populates the board behind me. And some of it is people just waiting for their team. And others are the same guy who's reading he's a Cubs fan, and I won't get it. It's Cubs at Washington. So it's always the visiting team is how the file gets saved. Okay. So he could find it when I get to Washington, but I won't get to Washington before I get to Chicago. So they're following down and reading the other threads before I get to their team. And then maybe they stick around afterwards. Who knows? So this is a big part of it. Another part that's a lot of fun. My original degree from Arizona State is in broadcasting, and I worked in sports radio for 8 years. So I was a producer behind the scenes and the update guy, bringing you the scores and news every 20 minutes in those little nice 1 minute or 90-second packages. So I have some sports writing experience. And so things happen in the, I would say the real game, but in our sim that I'll report on. So it sounds ridiculous because it's Tom Glavine, right? The most laid back guy ever. But on opening day, he got in an argument with the umpire and bumped the ump and got suspended for a week. And it's hysterical that it's Tom Glavine, but that's whose number came up. So I had to write the story of what happened because it's real baseball, so to speak. So here's Glavine getting suspended and me, letting them know about it. Where I got in trouble, because anything I update here, I'm also updating on our Facebook page and on our Twitter feed. So in the Diamondbacks game on Sunday, and this is really small print, but here it is. So it says, in the bottom of the second inning today in Montreal, Expos star Tim Raines hit a sharp grounder deep in the hole at shortstop. Diamondbacks infielder Ketel Marte dove to snag the sinking line drive on one hop and made a strong throw to get the speedy Raines out at first base. Marte was slow to get to his feet, and the training staff came out to check on him. He left the game, being replaced by Nick Ahmed at shortstop. Tests revealed an oblique strain, expected to sideline Marte until March 4th. Arizona has added center fielder A.J. Pollock to their active roster in Marte's place. That was all I posted originally. So that goes up on Eternal Baseball. And I found a picture of Marte walking off injured, which made it feel a little more real. Wasn't trying to snow anybody here, right? If you read the story, it says today in Montreal, Expos star Tim Raines, who retired before Marte debuted. But anyway, so I shared this to this group, Diamondbacks fans, on Facebook, and immediately the responses we get are, we got A.J. Pollock back? When did we get A.J. Pollock back? Pollock?
Never mind that there was a game in Montreal or that Tim Raines was involved.
One guy snipped that out, said, in Montreal, Expos star. So I had to explain it, and that's not a bad thing, but it wasn't intentional. So I went back and added the second paragraph. Follow the all-time best Diamondback squad as they power through the first season of Eternal Baseball. Roster scores, leagues leaders, standings, and box scores are all available over at www.eternalbaseball.com. I should have done that from jump, and I will moving forward. But I wrote what the explanation is down here. And the guy who was one of the confused guys said, okay, good to know. And then right at the bottom, I believe it's a gal wrote, thank God it's not real. If they make that move, I'm looking for a new team. He's a jerk. So Pollock will apparently never be forgiven by Diamondback fans for going to LA. But I like that, the writing was at least good enough that it confused a couple of people. And for opening day, I wrote full game recaps, where almost a full page of text for every game. And I loved watching every game, really the day before opening day, and writing those up. But it is a bear. It is really hard to get pay that much attention and write 16 different game recaps. So that was kind of a gift for opening day, and those are posted too. I think people like those, but it isn't the kind of thing that we can turn all the time. So you may see those now and then. Maybe I'll do those for playoff games or World Series games or the All-Star game for sure. But that's where we're at. And the other bit that's cool that I really like, if you go into the teams and players, you can pick any squad. We'll go with Toronto just for randomness. And there's a couple of the game recaps that I've written. And here's a look at the active 25-man roster. And then on the farm, which is kind of ridiculous to say that, Vernon Wells and Joe Carter are on the farm. But, work with us here. And then I wrote what I think is a really compelling story about how we built the roster. And so it starts with, you got all the Hall of Famers, And there are a few guys that you actually have to fight for. If you're Toronto, that's Roberto Alomar, Fred McGriff, and John Olerud. McGriff is a really hard guy to place too, because he played 15 years. No, I think 16 or 17 actually, but 5 for Toronto, 5 for San Diego, 5 for Atlanta, and the tail end in Tampa. So the Tampa end doesn't matter. But wow, McGriff was 5 years in 3 different places and 5 good years in 3 different places. In the end, I think he ended up in Atlanta. But Toronto got Alomar and kept John Olerud as well. So, and this is what we looked at, was just looking at seasons, all-star, berths, MVPs, overall WAR, runs, RBI, homers, steals, and titles matter, right? A big reason why Olerud is Toronto's first baseman and not Seattle's. Not just 8 seasons to 5, but he won 2 titles in Toronto, right? That's their guy. It really is. So, and there were, I don't know how many are really hard. I think Randy Johnson is the poster child for really hard. Carlton Fisk is hard because there's so much passion on both sides, right?
Sure.
So we've heard that online about where he truly belongs. I'm trying to. Tug McGraw is hard, right? Is he a Met or is he a Philly?
I struggled with that one because I'm a Mets fan, but he also won a World Series in Philly, and the Mets have some really good closers. So in mine, he's with the Phillies, and I know I alienated a lot of my Mets friends.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think it's really close, but I think the title swings it, right? He won a title in Philly. Titles matter. And
he did win one as a Met in '69, but still, John Franco's the all-time leader in saves as a lefty, and a lot of his career was in New York. So I have Franco as the closer in New York, and McGraw as the closer in Philly.
And I think I do too, at least for the Met part of that. And you're right. I totally agree with you. The Mets have a really good pen without him. So, and I'd forgotten about McGraw's title in '69, but I've got Franco, Orozco, Randy Myers, Benitez, and then 2 displaced starters, Cone and Matlack, pitching, long relief. So, and that's now remember, this is everybody in their absolute prime. So I know Mets fans, when they see Matt Harvey pitching 4th, I mean, Matt Harvey still stinks, right? The smell of his exit probably hasn't fully gone away. But I'm talking prime time, all-star game starting, the Dark Knight, Matt Harvey.
Yeah.
And he was amazing at the height of his power. So, yeah, and this is one of the most terrifying lineup or rotations out there. Seaver, Gooden, DeGrom, Harvey. Syndergaard's 5th, right? Kuzman pitches if somebody's sick.
Yeah, this is amazing.
And the only other one that just makes you weak in the knees, I think, is Boston. Because top 3, they go Cy Young, Pedro Martinez, Roger Clemens. Like, oh my, at the height of their power, like ridiculous. So, but anyway, this gives a good look. It gives you things you can talk about. Once in a while, and this happened on opening day, one of the few mistakes I saw, we had Jack Clark, who I think he moved around a little bit. His best years were as a Cardinal, but he played so much Giants baseball that he's really more Giant than Cardinal. But the trick was he can't make the Giants main roster, right? He's not even the best first baseman named Clark in Giants history. So he would have been bench in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So we gave him to the Cardinals, who are not that deep at first base. So Clark made the Cardinals, and I simply forgot about it. And a Giants fan the day before opening day said, "What about Jack Clark?" And I looked up, I said, "Yeah, how was Clark not on the roster?" I looked up the Giants, didn't see him. We added him to the Giants roster. And then he actually was I think he was on their bench when the real Jack Clark pinch hit for St. Louis on opening day. So I had the same guy on two, not just on two rosters, but in the same stadium. I had younger Jack Clark in the Giants dugout, and I had older Jack Clark pinch hitting for St. Louis. We fixed that the next day. And, there will be some kinks like that. I think I had that with R.A. Dickey, was on the bench in New York and in the minors for Toronto. So I will get that fixed.
I got to tell you, Mark, I am going to be a worse caregiver and friend for having discovered Eternal Baseball, because this is where my attention is going to go when I have free time. So if I'm not answering my friend's texts, it's because I'm on this website.
And I appreciate it, and it's I think it's compelling because every team gets treated the same, right? We aren't focusing just on the Yankees or the Giants, it's no secret that the established long-running franchises are going to have a real advantage, and the newer teams they're going to struggle usually. But here's the bit that really turned us over to the sim we're using. And again, that's action with an exclamation point, PC baseball from DK Sports at dksports.com. Is they have a great bit where every season they add a modifier to every player's stats. And it can go all the way up to 30% better or 30% lower. And you cannot view that number anywhere. There's no way to know how each player is going to be modified. But if you watch long enough, you'll see that, take the Mets, for example, that Koosman hasn't been scored on yet. He's only got 4 starts the first half of the season, but he's thrown 3 shutouts. Like, he cannot be touched. And maybe Matt Harvey's not getting it done that year, right? Even though statistically, the numbers that we entered show Harvey should be superior. Again, looking at their peak, ERA and the best parts of their careers. But that year, Koosman's better than Harvey. And if you're paying attention, you can make that swap. And so that randomness is just like real baseball, where guys have career years or down years. And maybe maybe it isn't just, I can't figure out my swing. Maybe a guy has a nagging leg injury that doesn't take him out of the lineup, but he's never at full strength all year. Or there's problems at home, or, maybe his grandmother is ill or whatever, right? There's any number of reasons why a player might have a down year or an up year, and it's all in here. And that was one of my favorite seasons that we simmed. The Rangers, who are normally middle of the pack or not that good, went all the way to the World Series. And it was ridiculous career years from like 4 guys. So it was, Palmeiro and Nelson Cruz and Juan Gonzalez and Pudge Rodriguez were all through the roof good the same year. And you see that in real baseball. Once in a while, a team just explodes and then fades back the next year. And I love that randomness, both in real baseball and in eternal baseball. So what I don't want is somebody who is a diehard Nationals fan to go, I love what you've built, but my team will never compete. How could it? Well, I'm not saying that the Nationals are going to be in the World Series a lot, but there is always that chance. And that's really what I want is year to year, just like real baseball. Everybody is saying, well, let's just wait till next year, right? We'll have a shot next year. And that's the hope that baseball is built on. And, I want to have that here so that people are excited for our second season when we wrap up our first season, because there's no trades in eternal baseball. Guys aren't going to change teams very often. And you'd have to be a pretty sensational rookie to break through onto one of these rosters in year 1. But I want people excited and wanting to come back, because if your team's just getting their teeth kicked in season after season, that's no fun, right? It's just the current season, the Mariners are one of the best teams. I think they started 7-1.
Nice.
And a lot of that is Randy Johnson. But again, that's only every fifth day. So they're competing and playing real well. So I like it when the expansion teams are not just competitive, but feisty and dominant once in a while. So,
Mark, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let the viewers know what the Marlins Utopian franchise is going to look like, and then while I'm doing that, why don't you cue up the Marlins for Eternal, and we'll at the end of the show we'll compare and see where I got it wrong.
Well, where we disagree pleasantly. How's that?
Sounds good. Before I get to the actual roster, here's some highlights for the schedule. So some of the teams have all home games on the holidays, and this year it looks like the Marlins drew the short end of the stick. They play on the road for these 5, but they're going to open the season March 26th at Washington. Memorial Day at St. Louis. Independence Day, they're going to be here in Milwaukee against the Brewers. Labor Day at the Bulls. And they're going to finish the season at the Kansas City Royals. Their home opener is April 2nd against the Montreal Expos. On opening night, Jack McKeon is going to go with this lineup. Leading off, playing second base, D. Gordon. Batting second, third baseman Mike Lowell. Batting third will be first baseman Derek Lee. Cleanup hitter will be right fielder Giancarlo Stanton. Batting fifth will be left fielder Gary Sheffield. Batting sixth will be shortstop Hanley Ramirez. Batting seventh will be catcher Jared Saltalamacchia. Batting eighth, center fielder Juan Pierre. And this year's ace getting the start on opening day will be Dontrell Willis, who was the best pitcher for the Marlins last year for a team that was in wildcard contention up until the last day of the year. But what's interesting for this year, and we did this for the Indians last week, everyone watching tonight is going to have a chance to vote for the 5th starter in the Marlins rotation. So we'll take a look right now. Dontrell Willis getting the start against the Nationals on opening day. Then it'll be Jose Fernandez, Josh Beckett. And then with the series starting Monday against the Orioles, it's going to be Pablo Lopez. And then the 5th starter, later tonight, we're going to throw up a poll that we're going to keep up for 2 days. You guys are going to have the opportunity to vote on who the 5th starter for Florida is going to be to start the season. Your choices will be Sandy Alcantara, A.J. Burnett, or Levon Hernandez. The starter that you choose will pitch as the 5th starter for the Marlins to start the season. The other 2 will join a bullpen that is anchored by Rob Nen, Brandon Kinsler, Steve Cishek, A.J. Ramos, Braden Looper, Jarlin Garcia, and Jay Powell. And rounding out the roster for the Marlins in 2021, we've got Francisco Cervelli, Mule Suttles from the Negro Leagues, Omar Infante, Brian Anderson, Edgar Renteria, Cliff Floyd, Marcel Ozuna, and Josh Willingham. So that's what the Marlins look like here. And we're taking a look now. Is this the current standings for the Eternal?
Oh yeah, it was. This is and this is the only thing that frustrates me about this sim. It's always missing one division here. So this is most of what's going on in Eternal Baseball right now. Missing just looks like the American League West.
I see.
And it's not always the same division. It's I've emailed about it. I haven't quite got it fixed, but you see your standouts. The Seattle's doing very well. Birmingham is good. The Yankees are very good. Atlanta's very good. Milwaukee is getting crushed. So I apologize, for that. But it is early, and it was the Red Sox got swept by the Royals opening the season, so they were 0-3. But they've climbed back up to 4-4. St. Louis, who is normally good, started 1-4. But I think all 4 of their losses were 1-run losses. So they had just had some tough luck there, and they're starting to turn it around. So it's a little early to be celebrating or despondent, but there are some trends. From what I heard about your Marlin lineup, it's real close to what we've got going on over here on Eternal Baseball. Now, again, some of the difference is because we're looking at an average 3-year kind of peak. And
Sure.
then if you look, we're already we're a week in, and they've already got 2 injuries. Jose Fernandez is out until April. Dontrell Willis is only out for a week, but that has thinned their rotation. So right now, with those 2 guys out, they're going with Josh Johnson, Josh Beckett, AJ Burnett, Alex Fernandez, and Henderson Alvarez, with Anibal Sanchez and Sandy Alcantara as spot starters. Their bullpen is primarily AJ Ramos, Rob Nen, and Suchek, I think. And then for the lineup, it depends on how you've built it versus lefties or versus righties. But right, you're going to play the righty lineup more often.
Sure.
So we have Sheffield, but we play him at third, which is dangerous because this is their defensive rating over here. So that's out of 10. So Sheffield's a 2. So if you put him in at third base, you are taking a risk. And nice. Lowell is on the squad too, so he would be a more traditional choice at third. Nice. Cliff Lloyd at first, Giancarlo Stanton in left. Christian Yelich is still a Marlin in our league, so he'll hit cleanup. Hanley Ramirez at short, JT Realmuto catching, Dan Ugla at second, and Preston Wilson in center. But a lot of the names that you mentioned are on the squad too, right? Mike Lowell here, Brian Anderson, Jeff Conine, Derek Lee, Charles Johnson. And then we have our minor league guys. That's the IA for inactive. And that's where you find Marcelo Zuna and Juan Pierre and Mark Kotze and Starlin Castro and some of the other guys. So I would say we're probably about 2/3 in sync. And again, some of that, and that's not you're right, I'm wrong, or I'm right, you're wrong.
Just different ways. Like I said, mine was just kind of off the top of my head. Like when I think of a team, who do I think of? Jeff Conine didn't even make my Marlins roster, and he's like Mr. Marlin. But I wanted to get a mix of like the great players and then some current guys. So Brian Anderson being the current guy there at third. I wanted to feature some of those, in case we got some younger members that wanted to see some of their favorite players.
Sure.
Mark, we do have a handful of questions and comments. One of the comments was someone wants to see a league that is all non-Hall of Famers. So, this my group and Mark's group is not for you then, because we do feature all the greats, all the Hall of Famers. But if there's someone out there that wants to create a third league with, a lot of Craig Counsell type players, right, by all means, we'll have you on the show.
I'm trying to think who would rule that league. Like Fred McGriff would be like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to find out who had this comment. Question here, Mark. How do you determine your postseason? How many teams, and how is that going to work?
Yeah, we made it really simple because we've got 8 divisions. So win your division and you're in. That's it. No wild cards at all. You have to win your division. And one of the things that does is it thins out some of the traditional powers, right? So you're never going to get the Giants and the Dodgers in the playoffs, even though they're both pretty good every year. It lifts the Yankee-Red Sox rivalry through the roof because only one can go. And it's not always them, though it's usually one of the two. Baltimore has a lot of talent. Toronto is usually bringing up the rear in that division just because they don't have the seasons to pull from. So win your division and you're in, and then it seeds by wins. So nice. 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3, and then so on and so on. So it's pretty simple. Although I have no problem with wild cards. I think wild cards are great for real baseball, and can be fun in a a creative or a fantasy league as well. But it just felt to me if you balanced it out, it would be hard for even if the Mets win 102 games and the Phillies win 99. Right? Philly fans be furious that they have a 99 win team that doesn't make the playoffs. And yet, you can't really say, well, we were going to the series when they couldn't even win their division. So it's a little cutthroat on some level, but I like that it's, winning you're in. Pretty simple.
I love it. So the website is eternalbaseball.com. Where else can we find you? You're on YouTube?
We're on YouTube, and we just did our very first kind of game of the week podcast this Sunday. I think we'll be on again this Sunday at 9:00 Eastern. Just look for Eternal Baseball on YouTube. And we ran a little long this week because it was our first show and we were explaining the league and how it works. But by and large, we're going to give you maybe 10 minutes, myself and my partner Brent, talking about what went on in that week, what's interesting in the world of Eternal Baseball. And then we get right into the game of the week. And we just pick one of the better matchups, essentially from the next day. So it's the first game from Monday. This week we did Giants and Pirates, and we play it live. And Brent and I co-manage whoever the home team is, and try to do them justice. We're not trying to sacrifice a squad or get goofy with it, because if Pittsburgh loses, the North by one game, and it was our Yahoo game that we kicked off the season with by giving everybody the green light and getting 7 outs on the bases. That's disrespectful, not just to the players, so to speak, but to the fans. We want fans to be vested. And if we aren't taking their team seriously, then, it's a bit of a slap. So we'll move around both leagues. We'll get all the teams on there, just looking for the best matchup. And sometimes the best matchup isn't Koufax versus Mathewson, right? I mean, you think, God, Giants, Dodgers, and divisional game, and great rivalry, and two of the greats ever who never pitched against each other. But that game's got 1-0 or 2-1 written all over it. And that's not necessarily the best game to watch from a computer perspective. So we will try to get good teams matched up, and we'll announce what this week's matchup is coming up on our Facebook page, on our Twitter feed, on our homepage. And we have off days just like real baseball does. So on an off day coming up, I think Friday is actually a travel day for all teams. That's probably when we'll announce who we're going to have this week on the podcast. And because the sim's really versatile. You can do a bunch of different things with it. But like most good baseball sims, you can have it show just the last pitch of every at bat. So you're not going, it's 3-2 and Ted Williams has fouled off 9 pitches, right? That's great baseball, but that's bad TV. So it's just the last pitch of every at bat, and you can do it's a great sim in that you can hold the runner, you can not hold the runner, you can bring the corners in, you can play the lines in the outfield, you can hit and run, you can run and hit, you can bunt to sacrifice or bunt for a hit. There's pretty much anything you could do in real baseball, other than there is no intentionally hit batter button.
Okay.
You can walk him, but you can't hit him. And my favorite part of the first podcast, we were looking at the Giants outfield, which was Bonds, Mays, McCovey. And Bonds must have been older Bonds, and McCovey were rated as 4s defensively, but Mays was a 10. And sure enough, in the 7th inning, someone hit just a screamer over Bonds' head, and he never moved. And again, they're just dots on a field, right? But Mays ranged over and made a catch at the wall right behind Barry Bonds. So a ball that Bonds went, you know what? I got no shot at that. And Mays was like, I got it. No problem. Smack in the glove. So it's the game, the graphics aren't PlayStation 5, but there's a decent computer announcer. There's the crack of the bat. And the field they're playing on is a picture of the modern stadium wherever the franchise is. So it is kind of cool to see Willie Mays playing center field in the current Giants stadium, and that's some of the pull of the sim as well.
Tonight, as soon as we're off the air, I'm gonna try to drive some traffic to the first telecast, to the YouTube page. I'm gonna post that tonight. You guys can click; it'll take you right to Mark's Eternal Baseball YouTube page. Mark, you know I could talk about this all night. I've loved having you on tonight. We're going to have you during the season. When my season starts in about a month or so, we're going to look to get you on about once a week so that you can keep us updated on what's happening in the Eternal Baseball. And like I said, we loved having you tonight. We had one more question from a friend of mine. He's a big Rob Deere fan. Is Rob Deere on a roster in Eternal?
I think, let me look. Deere would be Brewer, right? I would think.
He spent 5 years here, but he had cups of coffee with the Giants. Red. I think.
Let me see.
It would have to be either Brewers or Tigers because I think he was a Tiger for 3 years.
So and he was good in Detroit. I remember that. So let's see. Detroit. Or I'm looking at Milwaukee. I'm not seeing him here in Milwaukee. And I don't believe he's in Detroit. Detroit's a hard team to make.
Yeah, that is definitely a hard team.
I think Deere just misses. I don't recall him anywhere. He is certainly not on. That sounds rude. I don't believe he's on the starting roster anywhere.
Okay.
Maybe in the minors, but again, that might be somebody that I overlooked. Right? In no way am I saying that we had it gospel right. So I'll dig into that. Let's take a look at Rob Deere's best years. I got this sneaking feeling he's probably a Brewer. But again, if a guy has a fantastic career somewhere else, he may have spent 9 years in St. Louis, but been amazing in Cleveland. So he may be a Cleveland Indian on their all-time roster and not be able to make St. Louis. Sometimes that happens. A good example is Matt Williams, right?
Yeah.
If you think of Matt Williams, you think of him as a Giant. I think most people do. And he was better as a Giant than he was in Arizona. He only really had one peak year as a Diamondback, but he can't make the Giants squad, right? They're so deep. They got 120 years of talent, but he can make Arizona and you can start for Arizona. So sometimes it works out that way where a guy actually ends up on a club he's lesser known for, but he can play there where he couldn't play for a more established squad.
Mark, this is amazing. I love this. Again, the site is eternalbaseball.com. This was Mark Weber. We're going to have, like I said, we're going to have Mark on again during the season. Check out eternalbaseball.com tonight. I'll post a link to get you that YouTube page. Mark, thanks for being on tonight. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm so glad that you reached out and that we connected so quick. And I love what you're doing here too. So I think we'll have whatever fan bases we have. I think they'll both dig what the other guy is doing. So I think we're in for 3 good seasons of baseball here, right? We got the Major League Baseball,
yeah.
We got the Utopian Baseball Universe, and we got Eternal Baseball. And for guys like us, that's still not enough baseball.
It's not enough. Guys, if you're watching tonight, I don't want to ever hear you say I'm bored, because we're giving you 3 different things to look at here: Major League Baseball, Eternal Baseball, Utopian Baseball Universe. Thanks again to Mark Weber. I'm Joey Buckholtz. Tomorrow, a little bit later show, we're going to be on at 8 o'clock Central, our Houston Astros show. So we'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Mark, thanks again. And have a good night, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good night, everybody.